Hey guys, what's what if Naruto was become the new Saint Nick and unpredictable by Santa Claus movie? Twas the day before Christmas, when all through the village not a ninja was stirring, not even a carriage. Ignoring the author's pathetic attempt in rhyming, every resident of Konoha was fast asleep. It was a snowy night, something rare in the land of fire, with streets blanketed with sheets of white. Nearly all were asleep, except for Anbu patrols, from civilians to jonin, from academy students to genin, from newborns to the Hokage who slept peacefully in her bed, hugging a body pillow into her large bust. Dreams of a certain blonde genin smiling at her filling her mind all slumbered. All over the village, children slept, having adventurous dreams, while eagerly waiting for morning to come, waking up to towers of presents delivered to them by the all-time famous and Christmas figure, Santa Claus. The well-known rookies of the current generation and their teachers slept in their own homes, all stranded in the land of dreams. Well, maybe not all of them. Oh shit. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. I am in so much trouble. These were the quickly panicking thoughts of one pajama-wearing Naruto Uzumaki, currently outside his apartment in the cold night, bare feet in the snow. Why was Naruto out in the snow in his PJs? Well, maybe it had something to do with a dead body currently laid flat on the show in front of him. Yep, Naruto Uzumaki has just committed murder, call the police. Alright, before anyone panics, let's look back on how this whole thing started. Naruto had been sleeping in his bed, dreaming the same dream he always dreamt about. Swimming in a large bowl of ramen, he had been enjoying his dream even more since he had finally got his heater fixed to melt away the coldness plaguing the room. He had been looking for the morning to come, as the rookies were going to get together and exchange gifts they got for each other. Naruto had been saving enough money from his missions to get a present for all his friends. Jiraiya, who had given him a surprise visit last month, even helped pitch in for his student and gave him a check for 11,500 yen, $100 US. With having enough, he bought a gift for each of his friends, his teammates and sensei, for team 8 and 10, even for team 9, for Iruka sensei, the Ichirokas, Shizune Michin and Tsunade Bachin. Yes, Naruto was definitely excited for tomorrow. Unfortunately, his sleep was abruptly interrupted when he heard a sound, looking up at the ceiling, his ears having a hearing as fine tone as an Inyazuka's, picking up a sound of footsteps on his roof. Normally he would simply put the fact off as the Anbu or Jonin doing patrols and go back to sleep. If not for the fact that he knew such experienced shinobi would never show evidence of their whereabouts. Something he knew very well from when he would run from said shinobi when they chased him after his pranks years ago and last month. What could he say? Pranking was a tough habit to lose, after all. With his sleep ruined, his curiosity preventing his mind from going back to slumber, Naruto got up from his bed, keeping his eyes up at the ceiling as more thuds were heard. He wondered who could be up there. He wondered if Jiraiya was drunk again from doing his research and was crashing on his roof. Wouldn't be the first time. Walking to his closet to grab a jacket, he paused when he heard what sounded like a heavy thud. What the databao? He muttered, grabbing his jacket. He walked toward the door, exiting out into the hall of the apartment building. He shivered as he felt the nightly winter chill pass through his bones. Now he was regretting only wearing his pajamas and jacket. He didn't even wear footwear. Good thing he didn't get sick, though he wondered, can he still get frostbite? Is it too late to go back inside? The sound of footsteps up on the roof was his answer. Sighing, he began walking towards the steps leading up to the roof, all the while cursing his curiosity. It has done him more harm than good through his life. Unfortunately, things got worse for him when he saw the out-of-order sign posted on the door to the stairs. Apparently, the stairway was still in ruins from the Sound Sand attack. He made a mental note to talk to Tsunade Bachin about that tomorrow. Grumbling, the urge to return to his warm bed growing stronger, Naruto turned around. However, before he could enter his residence, he stopped. His ears, flushed red from the early cold, twitched as they picked up a sound. It sounded like bell. Furthermore, they seemed to come from the same spot as the early thuds. A party, maybe. Who would have a party this early in the morning? He pursed his lips and thought, only way to the roof was by going outside. Was he truly curious enough to risk going out into the freezing winter snow? Just then, he heard another sound, laughing. A deep joy-filled laugh from what he could pick up. Okay, that's it, he was going to see what's going on up there. He entered his room to grab snowwear, putting on his snow boots used on his team's mission to the land of snow. He began heading out to the outside. The second he opened the door out, his brain cursed his curiosity as he was suddenly assaulted by a harsh gust of wind. He gritted his teeth as he tightened his jacket around him, ducking his neck down in a futile attempt to cover his head. He stepped out into cold night street. Obviously, it was empty, everyone else sleeping, the streets covered with white snow. Practically sparkling with its purity, no spot contaminated from dirt in sight. For the moment, Naruto ignored it, instead looking up at his apartment building. With the stairs out of commission, he had only one way to get up there. Ninja style. His apartment building was pretty big, easily 10 stories, however, getting up there was easily, and he demonstrated it by placing his feet on the side of the building, channeling his chakra, and began to smoothly walk vertically up like it was no one's business. Walking up to the roof, he stopped just short of it and stealthily peeked over the edge. It was too dark to see, but his keen eyes having a side equally enhanced thanks to being a Jinchuriki, can pick up the figure covered in shadows. The person was large, big belly large, and he could pick up the sound of jingling bells. He was wearing bells. Well, that ruled the guy out as a shinobi. Bells make too much noise, and no noise a shinobi makes could be their death, as they weren't careful, at least that's what Iruka-sensei told him. He saw the person bending over and shifting himself higher, saw he was looking into a large red cloth bag. He raised a brow. Who was this guy? A burglar? Given his shape, he doubted he was even fit to sneak through a window without getting stuck. Then again, appearing could be deceiving. As silent as he could, he pulled himself up to the roof and snuck closer to the man. His presence remained undetected, the man's focus being in whatever he was looking for in the bag. Getting closer, he tilted his head when he saw what he was wearing. A set of Santa Claus attire, red suit, pants, and coat and all, black boots and gloves fitting his large hands and feet. He even had a red white furred hat with a bell on the point. And a long white beard as white as snow. What is this guy? Some kind of cosplayer? Is he a hired Santa Claus actor for kids? Why is he on top of the roof at this late hour? Finally, he decided to get the man's attention and spoke up, "Hey you." Unfortunately, that turned out to be a very bad idea as the man jumped in surprise. Even more unfortunate, the roof was covered in slippery frozen rain. Even more unfortunate, the man was pretty close to the edge. All those facts together led to the man tipping over the edge with wildly waving arms and with a shout, fell over, eyes widening. Naruto ran to the edge, being careful not to slip, and looked over the edge. Oh shit. Looking over, he watched the man fall into the snow-covered ground, getting buried deep in it, leaving an outline shape of his form. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Continuing his mantra, he leaped over the edge, dropping down below with grace only a ninja had. He quickly moved to the man-shaped hole, stomping his feet into the snow. "Hey, old man. You alright?" The groan from the hole was his only response. "Don't worry. He'll get you out," he called and reached into the hole, grabbing the man's hand. He gritted his teeth as he tried to pull the man out. Kami, this guy was heavy. He huffed as he staggered back. "Okay, going to need help." Crossing his fingers, he summoned 2 shadow clones beside him, nodding. They tried once more to pull him out. Unfortunately, it was still no use. "Damn it, how heavy is this guy?" one clone demanded. "It's like trying to lift that big Todiro Senin summoned that first time," the other clone stated. The 3 Narutos continued to pull with all their might. Suddenly, they fell backwards, the weight they were tugging suddenly disappearing. With yelps, they fell backwards. Blinking, they sat up and saw they were holding clothes. Naruto holding the large white furred lining, red coat which seemed to be made of silk, while the clones held a large glove and bell hat respectively. "What they?" Naruto asked, looking confusingly at the coat in his hands, glancing at Hole, giving how the man landed on his back and his weight, he wondered how he suddenly pulled his coat out from under him. Did this guy just use a substitution? He asked and crawled over to the man's spot, looking in, he blinked in surprise. Hess gone. Reaching in, he pulled out the rest of the clothes laying there. Hess' eyes widened slightly when he held up the large pants. He looked around, looking to spot the guy. Guy left his pants. Hess running naked, he muttered with a wince. He hoped he was okay, as he took a long and hard fall. He'll also have to apologize if he found him, as he was the reason the guy fell in the first place. "Hey boss. Look at this." Turning his head around, he looked at the clone, who held up what looked like a business card. It fell out of the coat. Grabbing it, he looked at it, brow raised, he read what it said. Santa Claus, North Pole. He then turned it over and saw something written on the back. "If something should happen to me, put on my suit, the reindeer will know what to do." "What the databao?" one of the clones questioned, tilting his head. "Santa Claus. Reindeer." Naruto clone number 2 shrugged. "Maybe he really was an Akamichi, and these deer belong to the Nara clan, and we have to bring them back to them." Naruto raised a brow, looking around, "But I don't see any deer." "Dingle." Blinking, Naruto raised his head, looking toward the roof when the jingling sound came from, sharing a look with his clones, who shrugged. He got up, he shivered as another winter breeze hit him, glancing at the coat in his arms, he hummed, "Well, he did say I could put it on," he muttered. "Are you sure that's a good idea, boss?" Clone number 1 asked, hearing him. "Yeah, it'd be a family heirloom, and it might be disrespectful if you put it on." Clone number 2 added. Naruto shot them a glare. "You two shut up. I'm freezing my ass off here." Ignoring their warning, he put the large coat over himself. Given their great difference in size, he looked rather silly with the large coat hanging over his short body, and his clones told him just that. You look stupid, number 1 deadpanned, its fellow clone nodding in agreement. Shut up, Dadabeo. Grumbling, Naruto scooped up the rest of the clothing in his arms and made his way back up the roof, his clones behind him, while holding some of the clothes as well. Once they reached the roof, they looked around for whatever was making the jingle. It was actually super easy to find the source, as it stood right in plain view and was impossible to miss. Right there, in the middle of the roof, was a sleigh, made of rich crimson red painted wood with golden lining, and tied to it and lined up front in 2 rows, were 9, count them, 9 reindeer. Naruto and his clones blinked once, turned to the other, and then looked back at the deer. They were still there, and this was the same roof of his buildings, and he didn't see the animals there before. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Clone number 1 asked, looked dumbfounded at the reindeer, who saw the 3, and blinked. That depends, are you staring at 9 reindeer suddenly showing up at the roof of our apartment when you know they weren't there before? Clone number 2 questioned, not taking his eyes off the reindeer at the front, staring at him, his nose wet and colored a bright red, a wooden sign hoisted on the rain vest saying Rudolph. If so, then the answer is yes. Naruto shook his head, questioning what the hell was with all this craziness. First he finds what could have been a robber on his roof, then caused said robber to fall over the edge down to the street below. His fault, he would admit. Then the man suddenly vanished, leaving behind his clothes, and now there were 9 reindeer on his roof. Seriously? What the Dadabeo? A man in a red suit, big white beard, and now reindeer, you don't think? Clone number 1 muttered, leaving the question hanging, and he turned to his fellow Narutos. Naruto shook his head, realizing what his clone was hinting at. There was no way. It was impossible. Nah. No way. It can't be. Santa Claus isn't real, he's just a story told to kids. Sure, he had once believed that a jolly fat man delivered presents to all good boys and girls around the world on Christmas, but the years had made him stop being a believer, mostly due to ridicule and being made fun of by older kids. He walked toward the deer. I'm sure there's a good reason why there are deer on my roof. Maybe a Nara member was talking them out for a walk and lost them. On my roof, he trailed off, sweat dropping as his clones gave him deadpan looked. Yeah, even he knew that was a stupid excuse. In the middle of the village? Number 1 asked, raising a brow. Without Anbu noticing. Number 2 added. Naruto chuckled nervously with a sweat drop. Number 2 then had a sudden thought, wait a minute, if that guy really was Santa Claus, that means, eyes widening, he pointed accusingly at his creator, holy shit boss. You killed Santa Claus. You're going to jail. Number 1 began to panic, that means we're going to jail. It was an accident. Naruto tried to prove himself. As the Narutos were panicking with the news that they killed Father Christmas, the reindeer glanced at one another, some sweat dropping at the 3, while others shook their heads. Well, they should be saddened that their caretaker was gone. Sadly, this was something that was not a rare occurrence. Santa can't always be lucky in being undetected. Breaking away from his clones, Naruto sighed. He wondered on what he should do. Actually, what can he do? It wasn't like he could get help on this. He couldn't just walk up to someone and say, so yeah, I accidentally killed Santa Claus by scaring him and making him fall out of my roof. Can you help? Yeah, that would lead to a one-way trip to a Yamanaka mental hospital. He looked at the reindeer. What should he do with them? Should I give them to the Nara clan to take care of? Are Santa's reindeer any different from regular deer? He then moved his eyes to the sleigh at the back. If that guy really was Santa Claus, he wondered what his sleigh would be like, and it couldn't hurt to, I don't know, take a seat on it, right? For just a second. He wouldn't get in trouble, right? After all, the owner was dead. Wow, that sounded very dark in his head. Reaching the sleigh, he ran a hand along the wood. It was very smooth, like silk, and even with it being around 10 above zero, it felt warm. He also saw what looked like the sack he saw before on the back of the sleigh. However, unlike last time where it was big and seemed to hold a lot of stuff, this time it seemed to be empty. He raised a brow on that before shaking his head. It was probably nothing. Looking at the carriage, he bit his lip, taking a risk. He got on it and sat down. He smiled, liking how warm it was. Wonder if I can keep this. Meanwhile, while Naruto was taking comfort in the sleigh, his clones were up front, inspecting the reindeer. I heard that Santa's reindeer could fly extremely fast, able to travel the whole world in seconds. Clone number 1 stated, petting one deer Cupid if he read the name right, it written in a strange language, but he could understand it perfectly, weird on the head, with the animal allowing him as it even nuzzled itself on his palm. I still find that hard to believe, number 2 said, crossing his arms. How could one man deliver presents all over the world in just one night? Then again, in a world where 15-year-old teens could clone themselves in the hundreds, guess a jolly fat man traveling at the speed of light in just hours couldn't be too far-fetched, right? Number 1 waved his brother off. Where's your sense and wonder, man? Don't you believe in magic? Number 2 gave him a deadpan look. You're me, just as you, so you should know the answer to that, Dumbus. The first clone glared at him for a bit before shaking it off. Whatever, asshole. I still think it's pretty cool. I think these guys rock," he said with a large grin and slapped Cupid on the buttocks. Unfortunately, that was the wrong thing to do, as with a start, the reindeer began to scurry off, causing the original Naruto in the sleigh to nearly fall off as he was pulled. The clones watched dumbfounded as the deer ran off the edge of the building and literally ran up into the night sky, Naruto giving a shout as he held on for dear life. Back on the empty rooftop, the two clones blinked once, twice, trying to comprehend with what just happened. Whoops. Clone number 1 said with a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of his head. Clone number 2 sweat dropped. Just great, now what do we do? Their creator was off to who knows where, leaving them behind. Number 1 cupped his chin, thinking about it, want to raid the boss fridge before we dispel ourselves, he suggested. Clone number 2 shrugged, sure, with that, they moved to head inside. Their boss was no doubt fine, right? Meanwhile, with the original Naruto. Somebody stop this crazy thieing. Naruto shouted as he held on for head life onto the hold of the sleigh as it was shooting through the air like a missile, the air pressure slamming into him and nearly sending him flying back if it wasn't for his hold. The reindeer pulled the sleigh fast over the skies of Konoha, high in the air, giving the blonde a majestic view of the snow-covered village. If he had his eyes opened, why did I sit on the sleigh? I'm such an idiot. He mentally shouted. Luckily for him, his forced ride soon came to an end as he felt the sleigh finally come to a stop. Slowly, he opened his eyes and to his great delight, he saw that they were parked on top of a building. He quickly got out of the sleigh before it could have a chance to take off again. He shook his head, the sudden takeoff had taken him by surprise and a bit dazed, he looked around and saw that while he was still in Konoha, to his happiness, he was in another part. He looked at the reindeer. What the hell? Why did you guys suddenly lift off into the air? He demanded. One reindeer Blitzen looked at him and made a noise. He raised a brow. What? He asked, not understanding. Blitzen nodded his head at him before turning to a small thin metal chimney, then at the sleigh, and back to him. Naruto looked confused, looking at the chimney, then at the sleigh. He then saw the empty bag. Blinking, he looked down at the Santa coat he had on, eyes widening. He looked up at Blitzen in shock. You can't be serious. You want me to deliver the presents? The reindeer all nodded. Oh come on. Is this because I killed Santa? I said it was accident. Blitzen made a grunting noise and again nudging at the sleigh. Naruto moaned, not knowing what he should do. These deer were telling him, Naruto Uzumaki, to deliver presents like Santa, to be Santa Claus. Sure he did kill the old one, but could they really expect him to do this? What the hell is even going on? Please let this be a dream. Once more, Blitzen gave a grunt, a look in his eyes practically saying do it. Rubbing his hair furiously, Naruto gave a defeated muffled shout and moved to the sleigh. Thus he had no choice. How was he supposed to get inside the house? No way that too could fit him. Should he enter through the window? Oh great, I'm a robber now. And what if someone catches me? The beat down from Tsunade was the least of his problems if he got caught. He moved to grab the bag and the bag's empty too. There are no toys or anything inside. But was stopped by a grunt, looking over his shoulder with a glare aimed at Blitzen. He himself grunted in annoyance. What? I'm doing what you want. He couldn't believe he was arguing with a deer. Blitzen grunted and nudged his nose to the sleigh. Looking at it, he spotted the rest of the clothes his clones put in. He looked back at the deer. You want me to put the clothes on? He asked, getting a nod. Sighing, he began to dress fully, all the while grumbling about bossy deer. First he had no choice but to remove his pajamas pants, leaving himself temporarily exposed to the hard night cold. Shivering, quickly he put on the large overalls, boots, gloves, and belt. All in all, they looked ready to fall off him any second now. He sent a look at the reindeer. He looked ridiculous. However, before he could move to make his thoughts known, his clothes suddenly began to change. To be more specific, they began to shrink. He watched on in surprise as the clothes, once too big to fit him, now fitted him perfectly. Huh? He questioned what just happened, looking at the deer. They had a slight smug look on their faces. Was that even possible? Shut up, he grumbled, looking at the sack. He frowned as he picked it up, looking at the deer. Isn't there supposed to be presents and toys in this thing? It's completely empty. He demonstrated by opening it up to show the empty inside. Blitzen grunted, and he just barely understand what he was trying to say. I'm telling you, there's nothing ins was his angry shout as he shook the bag. However, he suddenly stopped when he both heard and felt something move inside it. He looked at the sack in shock, quickly opening it. His eyes widened when he actually saw toys and presents inside. What the hell? He looked at the bag in shock, turned, looked at the reindeer, back at the bag, at the reindeer, bag. Finally, he just closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and turned his back to the deer. You know what, forget it. He had enough surprises for tonight. Walking over, he stood over the chimney. How the Tebeo do I even get in? He questioned. Fortunately or unfortunately maybe, his answer soon came. Ocean blue eyes widened as he looked down at his hand. It, along with whole body, began to glow softly. What the? To his great shock, his body started to sparkle in a rainbow of colors, giving a startling shout. His body began to break apart in rivers of sparkles. The sparkles flew through the air, going into the chimney, down the air pipe, and entering the house. Inside the house, everything was dark with the lights off, all was silent, the occupants sleeping soundlessly, the only lights shining being those on the Christmas tree set up in the living room. Suddenly, from the air vents, showers of twinkling dust danced out and collecting together on the ground, coming together, they formed a blinking Naruto, who looked around in shock. Huh? Wah? What the? He muttered dumbly, unable to believe what just happened. Okay, that just happened, Dadabayo. Shaking his head, putting it off for later, he looked around. Alright, he was in the house, now what? Glancing at the bag in his grasp, he shrugged. Guess he should do what he was sent to do. Sitting the sack gently on the ground, opening it up by loosening the string closing the top, he began to take out the presents one by one and set them under the tree. He never had a Christmas tree before, but he heard from other kids long ago that one is supposed to place the presents in order by size and in groups by name. And at least, that's what we do at my house. How do you place your present? Let me know in reviews, XD. As he placed the presents, he would look at the names to know which go where. When he suddenly froze, he stared at one present, more specifically, he stared at the name. Mogi. Mogi, it couldn't be that Mogi, could it his self-proclaimed future student and disciple along with her two friends. Unfortunately, before he could think much on it, he jumped when he suddenly heard a should. Standing up with a start, he turned around, his eyes widened. There, in front of him, standing at the doorway, was the young girl he was just thinking about, a glass of milk in hand, her mouth slightly agape in surprise as she stared at him with wide eyes. Fuck. Naruto cursed. He had been so distracted by the present, he didn't detect anyone sneak up on him just like the old Santa. Only good thing was that he wasn't on the roof, and now he was spotted by his little student a loose term, as he only gave the brat some advice and no more. His mind ran 100 miles a second, trying to think of a way out of this mess. Last thing he need was to be suspected as a robber and thrown in jail. Fuck. Shit. Fuck. Mentally calling out more curse words than he had his whole life, Naruto tried very hard not to make his panic visible. What do I do? What do I do? Meanwhile, Mogi rubbed her sleepy eyes, looking at Naruto, seeing that she wasn't seeing things, she tilted her head to the side, something usually done by him, but his fans, Kono, Mogi, and Yuden, now do for giggles and confusion. Boss? She asked, making Naruto flinch. What are you doing here? In my house. At night. How did you even get in? Sweat began to drip from his head like rain, while he mentally screamed, how was he supposed to explain himself? Well, you see, I accidentally killed Santa Claus, stole his clothes, and took a joyride on his sleigh. Out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to deliver the rest of his presents around the world, because I'm just that awesome. Yeah, that will go well. Well, you see, he fumbled with his words, trying to think of something, anything, to help his case. Sadly, nothing that won't sound absurd came to mind. Mogi looked around, just now spotting the clothes he was wearing, the bag in his grasp, and the presents under the tree. Her eyes widened as she let out a gasp, making Naruto flinch. Boss, are you? Naruto quickly held his hands up, trying to prevent the young orange net from shouting and accusing him of robbing her presents. Santa, she all but squealed. Luckily it was a soft squeal, so it won't wake up her parents. Hopefully. He froze, unsure of what to say, how to respond to her theory. He just stood there, eyes sparkling like stars in childish wonder. The thought of her boss, her role model she was introduced to by Konohamaru. Being every child's favorite mythological figure made her feel like it was her birthday every day. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. How should he respond? Technically he was more of a substitute Santa once more. The old Santa was accidentally killed by him, but still Santa, for tonight. I guess you could say that. Her smile practically covering her whole face, Mogi began to let out a loud squeal. If he hadn't moved across the room in a blink and covered her mouth, the muffled squeal rang softly for a while, before eventually stopping. Sighing in relief, he slowly uncovered her mouth, making sure she wouldn't do so again. He chuckled nervously as the young girl looked up at him with such wonder and awe. Rubbing the back of his head, he quickly moved back to the tree and continued to lay out the presents in groups at a fast pace so he could leave. All the while, Mogi looked at him with sparkling eyes. Finishing, Naruto heaved up the bag and turned to Mogi. He chuckled nervously, scratching his cheek. I guess I better get going. You know, need to deliver presents and whatnot, and you should get back to bed. He turned to leave, not sure how exactly, like he did before, or through the window. When he was stopped. Wait. Came the hushed call. He turned to her and saw she had an adorable look on her face. Aren't you going to eat your milk and cookie? She asked. He raised a brow. Milk and cookies. Mogi nodded. Yeah. That's what Santa does, right? He eats the milk and cookies left for him, she pointed to the side and followed her finger. He saw the plate of cookies and glass of milk placed on a small table next to the couch. I helped Ka-san make them for Santa. You boss, I hope you like them, she mumbled, shifting in place timidly. He couldn't help but smile at that. She was so adorable. Looking back at the table, he walked over and picked up a cookie. Raising it up, he took a bite. It was kind of hard and cold, but he continued to eat them, drinking the milk. He wiped his milk lips and turned back to Mogi, who had been watching him timidly, and quickly looked away. Smiling, he walked toward her and placed a hand on top of her head, making her flinch. Slowly she raised her gaze up to him and saw him smiling down at her. They were great, Mogi. Thank you, he said, making her smile, cheeks burning in embarrassment. Now then, you should get back to sleep, and remember, you can't tell anyone Santa was here, or that you know who he is, okay? Mogi nodded. Hi, boss. She then surprised him by embracing him around the waist. Merry Christmas, boss. Naruto smiled down at her, petting her head. Merry Christmas. He then watched her head off to her room, sighing. He looked around for a way out. Luckily, he didn't have to, as his body once again began glowing. Here we go again, he muttered, as he dispersed into sparkles, going into the vent and coming out on the roof, reforming. He shook his head. He didn't think he was going to get used to that. Walking toward the parked sleigh, he tossed the empty bag on the back and looked at the deer, who looked at him. I still need to keep delivering presents, don't I? He asked and got nods. He sighed. Great, he muttered in defeat and got back in the sleigh. Grabbing the reins, he gave a whip, signaling the deer to begin taking off, once more flying over the village, the sound of the bells dressed around the deer's necks jingling, sounding out throughout the village. But miraculously not drawing any attention from the Anbu, as if they didn't hear them. Now that he was not taken by surprise, Naruto witnessed the gorgeous side of the village from his position. This was even better than watching from the monuments. Soon the sleigh touched down on the roof of an apartment building. Getting off, he grabbed the sack, which once again was suddenly filled. He stopped questioning it. What a minute. How am I supposed to know if I have the right room or not? He asked. He was seemingly ignored, however, as his body once again glowed and became sparkles. Entering the ventilation system of the apartment, he appeared in a room. Looking around, he didn't see any Christmas trees or any sort of decoration whatsoever. Shrugging, he got to work and opened the bag. This time, there weren't many presents, and none of them very big, the only large size being the size of his hand at best. He frowned slightly at that. He hoped that the presents still held great joy for the inhabitants. Setting the presents down to organize, he suddenly stopped, looking off to the side. He saw some picture frames on a shelf. He bit his lip and shook his head and turned back to the presents. However, he couldn't help but glance at the frames, cursing at his curiosity getting the better of him. He stood up and walked over to them. There weren't many frames, around 5 or so. Looking at them, his eyes widened when he noticed that he recognized some of the people on the frames. One frame showed a woman with violet hair pulled up in a spiky ponytail, wearing a fishnet shirt with a brown coat over it, the front open showing her cleavage, only covering half of her breasts, and a matching short skirt with fishnet leggings. She was giving the camera a wide grin. Naruto recognized her as the sexy but crazy proctor he met in the Chunin exam, Mitarashi Anko. Turning to the next frame, he recognized the sensei of Team 8, Yuhi Kurenai. If he recalled correctly, he had to saw, if but silently, like Anko. Kurenai was a gorgeous woman, with silky dark curly raven hair, and piercing crimson eyes, her ruby red lips smiling a beautiful smile. She wore a strange outfit that seemed to consist of wrapping, but it still seemed to draw out her beauty. The frame she was in seemed to be one of a team photoshoot, as she stood behind said team as they faced the camera. Her team consisted of students of his graduating class, Inyazuka Kiba, and his puppy partner Akamaru, Hyuga Hinata, and Aburam Shino. Continuing looking at the frames, it was easy to say that Anko and Kurenai were friends, as some photos showed the two hanging out, at times with other women. One he recognized as Kiba's older sister, Hana, a veterinarian. Looking around, he also realized that he was no doubt in the residence of Anko and or Kurenai. That realization also made him pale snow white. Oh shit. If either of the two found him here, he gulped, no wanting to think about what horrors they would put him through. Okay, calm down. I just need to set the presents, and then I can leave. Nodding, he grabbed the presents from where he put them and set them on the counter for easy finding. Nodding at that, he grabbed his bag and was ready to get out. However, before he could take a single step, he froze, gripping his head as a sudden pain struck him. What the hell? Suddenly, his vision seemed to flash. Anko gave a sigh as she entered her apartment, rubbing her hands to warm them. The cold was coming in, so she had to wear a normal warm coat instead of her light attire. Entering the living room, casually threw her coat on a chair as she entered her kitchen. Going to the fridge, she took out a bottle of sake. Sighing as she popped it open, she took a swing as she walked back to the living room. Her legs seemed to drag as she moved to the chair. Sitting down, she gave a small glance around her living space. The lights were off, casting the room in darkness, and she had no desire to turn them on. Leaning back on the chair, she let out a sharp breath and raised the bottle to her lips. Taking a few gulps, she closed her eyes. Christmas time has come, and like always, she was spending it alone. Kurenai was with her team, enjoying the day with her precious students. Hana was with her family, and Yuga was Kami knows where. Leaving her alone. But who cares? Certainly not her. Who cares if she had no one to enjoy the holiday with? She was used to being alone. Just as she has been all her life. Closing her stinging eyes hard, she took another chug. Not like she had any special people to shower her with gifts. Who would care about the snake bitch? She let out a choking chuckle, raising the bottle up into the air. "Merry Christmas," she muttered, as a single tear silently rolled down her cheek. The pain leaving him, Naruto opened his eyes and frowned. What was that? A vision. Was what he saw real? Anko, she spends Christmas alone, like me. His eyes rolled to the left, his head following, as he gazed at the direction of the hallway, leading to the bedrooms. Either by conscious decision or not, his body began to move, and before he knew it, he stood in front of Anko's room. He didn't know how he knew this was her room, but he just did. Before he could give any thought on it, he opened the room and stepped inside. His movements were silent, like a spirit, and was undetected by the slumbering Jonin. He frowned at what he saw. Anko was shivering, the blanket she slept with on the ground, and her sleep attire didn't help, a tank top and panties, not suitable for the cold night. Finally, the window was opened, letting in the cold air. Was she crazy sleeping in such little with the freezing winds blowing at you? It was almost as if she wanted to kill herself by the coldness. Shaking his head, he walked over to the window, his steps as silent as a master shinobi and undetectable, and closed the window. He frowned when it took a bit of effect, the window a bit rusty and rough, but he had managed to. Turning back to the sleeping woman, he walked toward her and picking up the discarded sheet, draped it over her form. He made sure it covered her tightly to shield her from the cold. It seemed to work as her shivering lessened a bit, but not by much. Kneeling down to her level, he took off his glove and gently grabbed her hands, frowning as he felt how cold they were. He did the only thing he could, holding them in his own. He leaned close and slowly exhaled on her hands, allowing his warm breath to warm her hands. As he did so, he gently rubbed them to increase the warmness. As he did this, Anko's expression, once one of a shivering frown, changed to a gentle smile. Stopping once her hands were warm, he smiled. He had to say, Anko looked even more beautiful with a real smile on her face. He didn't know what it was, but he felt a sort of connection to Anko. Maybe it had to do with their similarities. Both had rough pasts, hated by the village for events they had no control over, and faced to hid behind fake masks. Naruto knew of her mask, as it was easy for him to spot a fake smile when he had one of his own. He didn't know why, but even for just tonight, he wanted to make her Christmas night great. Staring at her peaceful face, he smiled softly, reaching up with one hand, he gently brushed a loose bang out of her face and behind her head. Suddenly, Naruto felt his vision blur. Before he could say anything, he found himself in a change of location. Looking around, he saw he was somehow back in the living room. Except, something seemed different. For one thing, the darkness seemed thicker than before, and looking around, he saw that there was a second occupant besides himself. Anko. Looking forward, he saw Anko there as well. Awake, she sat on the foot of the couch, in front of a lit fireplace, a bottle of sake on her left, and a box of dango sticks on her right. She had her trench coat just barely hanging from her shoulder to not fold down. Looking at her face, he frowned when he saw the similar void frown she had. She didn't even turn to him, or did she even know he was there, merely staring emptily at the flickering flames. What is this? A jinjutsu? He mentally asked, taking another glance around. He didn't know what happened. 1 second he had touched Anko's cheek, the next, he found it himself here. Did Kurenai, if she did live with Anko, wake up and saw him, trapping him in an illusion to capture him? Or was it something else? Looking at Anko, he frowned, his mind going back to that vision he had seen before. This was just like it, Anko alone on the special night, no friends or anyone to spend it with, just her and the cold. He didn't like it. Making his decision, he slowly walked towards her, making sure not to startle her. However, it seemed she was in her own little world, as she didn't even glance his way, as if she was in a trance that made his frown deepen. Finally, he stood over her, he slowly sat down beside her, still looked at her. No sound was made, only the crackling of the fire echoing through the space. Soft brown eyes stared almost lifelessly at the fire, and dark blue eyes looking at her with worry, leaning against the couch as well. Naruto looked down at her hand resting on the ground. Slowly, he moved his hand, and his fingertips lightly brushed against her hand. This caused an action, as Anko's hand twitched. As gently as he could, he wrapped his hand around hers, fingers entwining together. Anko blinked, suddenly feeling a surge of warmth spreading through her whole body, life appearing in her eyes. She raised her head and looked beside her. Her eyes widened when she saw a familiar whiskered face, blonde, eyes as blue as the clear oceans. It was the gaki she scratched back at the Chunin exam. Uzumaki Naruto. Why was he here? Where did he come from? And what was he wearing? However, even with all of these questions, the only thing she could saw was Naruto. Naruto smiled softly at Anko, not one of his usual happy grins he would give everyone, but a small gentle smile, one that for some reason made her chest warm. Anko, are you alright? The way he spoke, the concern in his voice, it made her skin tingle, cheeks burn, and throat become dry. He was worried about her. Why? He barely knew her. So why would he show such worry? She flinched when she felt him gently cup her cheek. She cold move. She wanted to scoff and put on a tough act, laughing off his concern like she would normally do. But she cold, words got caught in her throat, unwilling to come out. As he continued to stare at him with those worried eyes, she felt her own eyes sting in gathering tears. Why? Why would this brat care about her? She was no one. Just the village snake whore. The abandoned student of Konoha's most traitorous shinobi Orochimaru. Did he even know that? And even if he didn't, once he did, he would run away from her. They always do. Closing her eyes to both prevent the tears from falling, as well as shielding what they showed, she turned her head away, biting her bottom lip. It's nothing, Gaki, please, just leave me alone. Hearing that, Naruto frowned. He wanted to help Anko. He had gone through her pain many times before and wanted to help her. With his other hand, he gently cupped her chin and turned her head to face him. His frown deepened when he saw a few tears escape from under her eyes. He gently wiped those away, making a redness spread her cheeks. Slowly, she opened her eyes and looked at him. He smiled at her. Now why would I leave you alone on Christmas, Dadabeo? He asked her, making her eyes widen. What? She muttered. His smile growing, he responded, well, it is the time for family and friends to gather and spend time together, right? So I can't possibly leave you alone. The gasp left Anko's lips. Friends. You mean, did this kid, this brat, actually consider her a friend? Just like that, after their first meeting, she cut his cheek and practically harassed him by licking his bleeding cheek for Kami's sakes. A chuckle left Naruto's lips, as if finding her question funny. Of course we're friends, Anko-san. Who wouldn't want to be friends with a cool, if kind of scary, woman like you? Anko could say nothing, merely staring at the kid in shock, unable to believe what she was hearing. How? How could he just say stuff like this so easily? As if he just decides on things like nothing. She wanted to call his words false, saying he was just saying things he didn't know about. Tell him to stop messing with her. To leave her alone before she got slashy. However, she couldn't. No matter how much she tried to convince herself, no matter how much she tried to lie to herself, she wanted him to stay. There was a warmth around him, it drew her to him, wanting to feel it warp itself around her. Slowly, she inched herself closer to the blonde until she was touching him, looking up at him, her pale cheeks burning softly. She laid her head gently on his shoulder. Naruto looked down at her, seeing her Anko Mitarashi cuddle against him, seeking his warmth from the cold air. He could hear a soft voice, like a whisper, but he could still hear it clearly. Please, spend the night with me. He smiled at her and gently wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pulling her closer. Of course, Anko-san. Opening his eyes, Naruto saw that he was back in Anko's room. Blinking, he looked at Anko, who was still slumbering, but looking much more comfortable now, sleeping peacefully with a smile on her face. He smiled at that, glad she was better. He didn't know what just happened, but as long as Anko was alright, he didn't care. He gently rubbed her cheeks and could feel her nuzzle against his hand. Standing up, he turned to leave. However, before he could, he suddenly something in his coat pocket, raising a brow, as he knew there hadn't been anything in there before. He reached in, grasped something hard, and pulled it out. Looking at it, he saw that it was a small box. He tilted his head sideways at it, wondering how it appeared in his coat. Opening the box, he saw that inside was a necklace, appearing to be made of gold as it glittered in the light of the moon coming from the window. On it was a crystal of a bright sparkling sapphire. Looking at it, he glanced back at Anko, then back, before nodding. Closing the box, he gently sat it beside Anko's pillow, placing her hands gently on it to hold. He leaned back, before his eyes caught something. There, on Anko's shoulder, was the curse mark. He frowned, he could feel the darkness the seal radiated, like a leech. That won't do. By some instinctive force, his body acted, and he placed his right hand on the seal, covering it. His hand suddenly began to glow brightly, illuminating the entire room. However, Naruto didn't seem bothered by this, keeping his gaze on what he was doing. Anko's expression cringed a bit in discomfort, but held on. After a few more seconds, the glow began dimming away, before vanishing. Smiling, he uncovered the spot and showed nothing. No seal whatsoever on the spot, only unmarked skin, with only a small wisp of smoke before it vanished. He sent one last smile at the woman, before in a daring move, leaned down and pecked her softly on the forehead. "Merry Christmas, Anko-chan." Whispering those words to her, Naruto stood up before finally exiting the room, closing the door softly behind him. As he left, he didn't take notice of the slumbering snake mistress muttered one word. "Naruto-kun." In the hallway, Naruto looked around, unsure of what to do now. He had laid out the presents and should continue on his way. However, something held him back, as if he was not done just yet, and whatever this feeling was, it was directing him to the room right across from him. Frowning, he cautiously approached the room and silently turned the knob, entering just as silently and closing the door. He looked around. The room was nothing too special, picture frames on the wall and shelves along with drawers. He turned to the only sleeping occupant, and as he thought, it was one Yuhi Kurenai. Now, if Naruto was on state of mind, he would quickly leave before the woman woke up. He knew of her reputation as the Ice Queen and was one not to be trifled with, not to mention her mastery over illusions, which was his worst area of technique, and he didn't want to know what she would do to him if she found him in her room. However, the feeling from earlier kept him there, telling him he had to do something. What that something was, he didn't know. He looked around, trying to see if there was any reason for him being there. From what he could see, there was nothing. Unlike Anko, Kurenai slept comfortably. There was a heater in the room keeping the air warm, making him think it was a bit unfair for Anko, who had been freezing just a while ago, and the windows were closed. Rubbing the back of his head, he looked at the sleeping woman, taking a big risk. He carefully approached her. As he got near, he couldn't help but blush as Kurenai seemed too majestic as she slept, like a sleeping beauty. Like Anko and a few other females, he knew Kurenai was a woman whose looks were natural and didn't require any makeup. She also looked very peaceful, a contrast to the nearly constant stern look he sees her in when their teams run into each other. Given his experience, he could tell that Kurenai had a mask, not a large one like him and Anko, hiding their sadness and loneliness, but more of a mask to shield her from outside influence. He half wondered if it was one against males, as she would always coldly reject offers, having seen this once when he was being chased by Shinobi during one of his pranks. Looking at her pale skin practically glowing as the moonlight shining through the window hit her, he couldn't help but compare her to an angel. Moving closer, he slowly raised a hand and gently caressed her cheek. His eyes widened as once again, his vision got blurry. Shit. The young Kurenai, looking to be 5 or 6, was seen running with laughter as she headed home, her feet crushing the snow beneath her feet. Behind her was her father, smiling at his happy daughter as they neared their house. But the door practically slamming open, Kurenai ran in. "Ka-chan. We're home." Humming out from the kitchen, her mother smiled upon seeing her. "Welcome home, sweetie. Did you enjoy Christmas shopping with daddy?" With a wide smile, Kurenai nodded. "Uh-huh. We bought a lot of presents," she told her mother as her father entered, bags of gifts in his arms. As her mother helped her husband put down the bag on the table, she looked at her daughter. "Well, for being a good girl, I've baked you some warm cookies. They are on the kitchen counter." Hearing this, Kurenai's smile grew and ran to the kitchen, her parents chuckling behind her. Naruto looked around, finding himself in what could no doubt be Kurenai's old house. Looking around, he saw Christmas decorations all around, a tree glittering with flashing lights, stockings set up, and more. He looked at the young girl's parents and saw that their image a bit grayed out, making him frown, wondering why that was. Looking at little Kurenai, who was full color, and back at the parents, he pursed his lips. He continued to watch as Kurenai laughed and played with her parents, sitting in front of the tree, staring at it in wonder, or helping her mother cook or clean, helping her father finish decorations, or even try and peek into her presents, only to be caught by her parents and giggle away, or go out and play in the snow. Everything seemed to move in a fast pace as the next morning came, and he watched Kurenai open her presents with glee, thanking her parents for the presents she got. Like some kind of montage, the next year came, and the same would be done. 1 year, 2 years, he watched the scenes pass like it was going fast forward, and Kurenai grew older. Until one day. No longer was everything bright and happy. 12-year-old Kurenai sat in her house, on the couch, nails pulled up and wrapped in a tight embrace. He frowned as he could hear her soft crying. It was December 25th. 2 months after the Kyuubi attack. 2 months since her parents were killed. And she, for the first time, was spending Christmas alone. He frowned, sitting on the couch beside the crying girl. He felt terrible. Well, he knew he didn't directly cause the Kyuubi to attack. Being the beast's container made him feel like he was somehow responsible. However, he couldn't think like that like the villagers as he looked at the sobbing girl. He raised a hand, moving it until it was hovering over her head, and softly placed it on it. The shivering girl stilled, but didn't move. He frowned. Her position reminded him too much of his own. Many years ago, all those nights, curled up in the same position as he cried. Gently, he rubbed her hair, rubbing her scalp in a form of comfort. Slowly, Kurenai raised her head, looking at him, puffy red eyes stared into satin blue ones. He offered her a small smile. It's okay to cry, Kurenai, no one will judge you, just let it out. Kurenai bit her bottom lip, quivering. She clenched her eyes closed tightly, as if trying to be strong. However, her will was breaking. No longer was there a young girl sitting there, but a grown woman, hugging her knees in a protective form, her dark hair a mess from her emotions. Moving his hand down, he gently rubbed her back. Sharp sobs escaped her tight lips, trying in vain to keep them from coming out. However, it was no use, the dam was breaking, and Naruto's words were the sledgehammer. Just let it out, he muttered. The dam broke. Kurenai turned and slammed into Naruto's chest, finally releasing her built-up tears and sadness. The blonde just sat there, holding her as the woman cried. He rubbed her back as she let out her anger and sadness, over her parents' deaths, over having to spend many days, months, years, Christmases alone without them. To never more come home to the smell of her mother's freshly baked cookies, to no longer being able to help her father put up decorations. She even tortures herself sometimes, buying them gifts. Gifts that will never be opened. Forever placed in the attic, collecting dust. Oh, how she missed them, and how she hated that night, hated the Kyuubi. For taking them away. But did she hate Naruto? The one who had the beast within him? Did she hate the boy for holding the constant reminder of that night in him? No. No matter if there was a small part that did, she could never fully hate him. She would not go down that path. That's not what her parents would have wanted. How could she hate someone who didn't ask for what he was? How could she hate someone who was already hated by many? How could she hate someone who was currently comforting her in her grief? Naruto was silent, simply rubbing her back as Kurenai cried. He wanted to let her know that it was okay, that she didn't need to hide her sadness anymore, that she could cry, that she could let it out. That he was there for her. Soon, her cries dimmed, before finally stopping, but she did not move, she just stayed there, her face buried into his coat, her arms circling his waist. With his other hand, he softly rubbed her head. It's okay, Kurenai-sensei, you're not alone anymore, you have friends there for you, you have Anko, you have your students, and if you need to, I'm also here for you. Slowly, Kurenai lifted her head up, looking up at him, tears marking her cheeks as they fell. He never thought he would see such a strong woman in such a state, so small, so vulnerable, such a large contrast from her usual appearance. Smiling at her, he gently rose the woman up to a sitting position. He cupped her cheeks, wiping away the tear marks, all while she stared at him with her eyes displaying a storm of emotions, the most being gratitude and soft awe. He smiled at her. Everything's going to be okay, I promise, and Naruto Uzumaki never breaks a promise. Naruto, she softly muttered. She could only stare at the young blonde, who before her eyes, seemed to be giving off a bright glow, pushing away the surrounding darkness around them. Everything's going to be okay, my sweet Haim. The words of her mother rang through her mind, making her bite her lip to prevent tears from coming out again. Continuing rubbing her cheeks, Naruto smiled at her as the glow around him grew brighter. He then began to lean closer as he pulled her head down. Everything's going to be okay. It could have been her mind playing tricks on her, or a trick of the bright light, but for a second, Kurenai could have sworn she saw a transparent image of her mother overtake Naruto's form, as soft lips pressed against her forehead, a surge of warmth spread through her body, she closed her eyes, basking in the warmth, the glow around Naruto grew brighter, until it overtook the whole place. Naruto took a step back, taking his hand away from Kurenai's cheek, he took a deep breath, the sudden mind experience leaving him a bit dazed. First Anko, and now Kurenai, somehow, he had been able to enter what he could only interpret as their mindscapes. At least, that was his only guess, having been able to enter his own before. In fact, ever since he put on Santa's coat and got on the sleigh, he's been able to do weird things, and considering he could conjure up hundreds of clones of himself, that was saying something. However, looking down at Kurenai's peaceful expression and recalling the same one on Anko's, he simply shrugged off the questions. These strange abilities helped brought the two women from dark places, and so, he was glad for them. He looked around and spotted a clock, seeing a time, he cursed, if he wanted to finish delivering presents which just now realized, he didn't know how many houses were left he had to get going. Looking back at Kurenai, he acted on instinct and tucked in her sheet, brushed some hair from out of her face, and pecked her on the cheek. Standing back, he leaned down and grabbed his hat that had fallen off, putting it on, he walked out of the room, looking at Anko's room, he smiled, before walking back to the living room. As he entered, he looked around, he frowned, seeing it so barren of Christmas decorations and whatnot, and after what he had seen. Seeing what might have looked like some private information he had unwillingly entered, he knew they wanted the opposite of that. Wish I could give them what they wanted, he muttered. As you wish it, so shall it be. Naruto looked down, blinking as his hands began to glow. What the? The glow began to grow, nearly blinking him, and suddenly, in a way similar to when he becomes sparkles to enter homes, sparkles began to come out of his arms and trail. He watched in awe as sparkles flew around like strings, moving all over the place, and following their paths, objects began to appear. Lights, ornaments, snowman figurines. Around the room, Christmas decorations were appearing out of thin air. Even a fully decorated Christmas tree appeared. He looked on in awe, as in just a few seconds, the entire room was decorated like a full-on Christmas room. "Wow," he said, looking at his hands. "That was weird." He smirked, maybe being Santa isn't so bad. Grabbing his bag and with a subconscious command, he dispersed and began to move all throughout the apartment, delivering presents and decorating empty rooms. From an outside view, light flashed through windows as the jolly blonde Santa did his deed that night. In just 60 seconds, he had successfully delivered to every room in the apartment before reappearing back on the roof, looking off to the sky. He estimated he had a few hours left before morning light. He looked at the reindeer. "Okay, anyone knows how many stops I have to make?" he asked before slapping his forehead, remembering that he was talking to animals, thought smart animals from what he has seen. Luckily, he received his answer, as at the front, Rudolph stumped his hoof down on the ground. He heard a click and looking at the sleigh, saw a compartment open up. Raising a brow, he walked near it and saw what looked like a scroll inside. Reaching in, he took it out and unrolled it. He saw what could only be Santa's list. Names stacked in rolls, with nice or Noggy labeled next to them. Looking at the names, he saw many were crossed off, letting him know that the old Santa had been busy before. Ahem, he came and ruined things. Still, now there was a new Santa Claus to finish things. Naruto Uzumaki. The #1 most unpredictable Santa Claus. He liked the sound of that. Looking at the list, he saw the names of his friends and sensei. Closing the list, he put it in his pocket and got on the sleigh. "Well, let's finish things up, shall we?" Grabbing the reins, he settled up, on Dasher, on Dancer, on Prancer and Vixen. As he called their names, recalling how Santa would say it from the story, the reindeers stomped their hooves, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, on Rudolph. With heads held high, the deer pushed and pulled the sleigh up into the air. And on that fair night, a jolly being, not man nor child, but a curious young blonde, flew through the sky, rivers of dust in his wake, falling down on all who laid up. He danced with grace and skill on all tops of stopped, going down the chimney, big or small, leaving many presents and lights, maybe a prank or two for old time's sake. Not to mention eating the cookies and milk placed out for Santa. Upon the homes of his friends, he delivered their presents with care, granting them their beloved gifts, from a large ham for Choji, to a steak for Akamaru, from a new mask for Kakashi, to a brand new scarf for Ino, even a new species of insect for Shino. As time passed, the blonde fade's son Christmas moved in a flash, gliding like the wind, passing from house to house, from room to room. Throughout the night, only the sound of bells jingling was heard by every man, woman, child, and ninja. Naruto took a stop on top of the Hokage Tower, looking up at the far side. He saw there was only around an hour left until sunrise, and he only had one last delivery to make. Grabbing the bag, he followed the routine, and like a cloud of dust, entered the buildings. Forming in a room, he looked at the sole occupant, her blonde hair spread all over the bed, snuggling into her pillow, her expression one of longing peace, something he knew she deserved after working many stressful days and nights in her office. Walking forward, he took a seat on the edge of her bed, taking care not to wake her up, looking down at her. He gently ran his fingers through her soft hair, caressing her silky cheek. No matter how many titles he called her. Granny, old lady, Bachan, Tsunade would always be extremely beautiful to him. Sure, he knew it was only an illusion, made to hide her true appearance. Her true age. However, he didn't care. He found her beautiful no matter what she looked like, old or young. She was just too precious to him. He would even say she was more precious to him than Iruka-sensei, more precious than even Sakura. Grabbing the present bag, he opened it and looked inside. Only one present rested inside. Grabbing it, he looked at it. It was small, about the size of a ring box. He smiled softly, getting a feeling this wasn't just any present, but one from him, something he wanted to get to her. Looking at Tsunade, he leaned down and gently kissed her cheek. Opening his eyes, he saw that he was standing on the roof of the tower. Already knowing where he was, he looked ahead and saw Tsunade, standing at the railings, looking over the village, the light of a morning sunrise hitting her. He felt awe at the majestic appearance she had, appearing like the princess she was. He walked over and stood beside her, catching her attention. "Naruto?" Tsunade asked, surprised to see him. Naruto turned to her and smiled. "Hey, Tsunade-chan," he greeted. Tsunade's eyes widened at the Chan added to her name. That was the first time the younger blonde has ever called her anything besides the accursed Bachan. Her cheeks turned a bit red in embarrassment, making her turn her head away. Naruto chuckled at that, before turned back to the village. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Tsunade, still a bit red on the cheeks, also looked forward at the village her grandfather founded and nodded. The two stared in silence at Konoha and the rising sun, taking comfort at the other's presence. Soon, Tsunade looked at Naruto, her cheeks burned when she saw the peaceful and calm look he had, a contrast to his usual hyperactive self. If she admitted it to herself, she would saw it made him look very handsome. She cleared her throat, getting his attention. "What are you doing here, Naruto Kukaki?" Her blush grew when she nearly called him by kun. She couldn't have her inappropriate feeling for the young man who had saved her from her depression and gloom, helped her deal with her demons of the past, and restore her light. Known. Not like such a thing was possible, given their large age difference. Unknown to her, a sigh of sadness and longing escaped her lips. Naruto saw and heard that and frowned before quickly putting on a smile. "Well, it is Christmas and I wanted to spend it with my favorite Hokage." He told her. It was a half lie. He did want to spend the Christmas with her, but he was also there for another reason. Tsunade blushed at hearing that before masking it with a teasing smirk. "Oh? I'm your favorite Hokage. What about your hero? The fourth?" Naruto shrugged, having a smirk of his own. "Well, guess I'm a sucker for a beautiful woman." Honey brown eyes widened, her face practically burning red at hearing Naruto call her beautiful. Sure, she had always been given comments like that, but the genuine feeling his words had, it made her heart beat fast. The only one who had made her feel like that was Dan. She looked away from him, making a scoffing sound. "Stop messing with me, Gaki." She stuttered. She didn't want the brat to play games with her, not now. Not on Christmas. A gently hand cupped her hand and made her face him, ocean blue eyes staring at her. Those eyes held such feeling and love in them that it practically drowned her. Was it her, or were legs feeling weak? "It's not a joke, Tsunade," he told her, his voice soft, making her shiver. "You are beautiful, one of the most beautiful women I've ever met." Tsunade bit her lip, clenching, her eyes shot as tears gathers. However, they weren't tears of joy or anything of the sort. They were tears of sadness. Why? Because she knew, and knew he knew, that her current appearance was fake. For under this 30-ish looking woman was really an old hag pushing her 50s. Seeing tears fall down her cheeks, Naruto reached up and brushed them away before cupping her cheeks. Slowly, her eyes opened and looked at him. "Tsunade. What is it you want the most?" His words come out in a whisper, but to her, they echoed loudly in her mind. It was a question that struck her to the core. It rang and bounced around her head like a rubber ball. What did she want the most? What did she want? If she were selfish, she would say she wanted money, enough to not only settle her debts, but also so she could retire peacefully. If she were selfish, she would say she wanted sake, a lot of it to greedily drown herself in, so she could go on with life without a care in the world. However, as she stared into the whiskered blonde's eyes, orbs of the purest blues she had ever seen, eyes that could pull her into a bottomless abyss to take her in its comfort and care. If she was truly selfish, caring only about herself, she would say that she wanted, that the only thing she truly wanted, the only thing in the whole world. "Love," she muttered, closing her eyes as tears fell. She pressed her cheeks deeper into his warm hands. "What I want the most is to be able to fall in love one more, to be young, and find that one person to be with, to no longer be alone, that is what I want." Naruto smiled at the woman. "If that is what you wish," he muttered, and to her surprise, began to draw her head close, as he did the same. "Naruto," she muttered softly, unable to move or stop him. Her heart began to beat harder against her chest, almost ready to burst through. Their lips drew closer, and the cage made no move to stop him. Why would she? "If that is what you desire," he whispered, the sentence caressing her ears, "then I will give it to you." Their lips meet, making her gasp at the contact. Her eyes widened at what was happening. Naruto Uzumaki, her genin, was kissing her. Her. The 50-plus-year-old Hokage. Was he crazy, insane? Did he not realize just what he was doing? She should push him off. Yell at him. Tell him he couldn't do this. That it wasn't right. But she couldn't. After so long, someone was kissing her. How long has it been since her last kiss? Not counting the one she gave him when they had settled their bet, her last kiss was with Dan, all those years ago. So long, was she really willing to stop something she longed for? To stop a kiss given to her by this extraordinary young man? Was she willing to reject him and end up alone again? Screw that. She mentally shouted, "We ninja live life on a thin thread. I'm taking this show all the way." With her decision made, she wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck and pulled him closer, deepening their kiss. Naruto was surprised by this, but just rolled with it. As they kissed, Tsunade began to feel warm, like really warm. Like fire was spreading through her whole body. And it was incredible. It coursed through every inch of her body. It seemed to soothe her muscles, past achings vanishing with no trace. It was like her body was getting younger. Unknown to her, that was exactly what was happening. Naruto didn't know how, he didn't think it was possible, but apparently these abilities granted to him from being Saint Nick did not seem to reach a limit and pass through the realm of impossibility, able to do things he didn't think was possible. Yes, there really is a thing as Christmas magic, for that was the only thing that would explain how he was able to reverse time and make Tsunade younger. Unknown to the woman, her illusion she had put on herself had been forcefully cancelled a while ago, and to his very eyes, her slightly wrinkled skin which wasn't much, only a few. Wow, can someone say paranoid? XP grew healthier and lighter, not to mention smoother pale blonde hair grew brighter and silkier, becoming a golden shade, her figure matched the one in her illusion, keeping her sexy appeal. As the two blondes kissed, the environment around them began to glow brighter. Soon, the image of the village was overtaken in a large light and everything began to fade. The white lights began to enclose around the two until they too were overtaken. Naruto looked down at the woman who had tugged his heart, while their actions in her dream world had surprised him. He didn't really care, he chuckled. Well, I am an idiot, he thought, before standing up, looking out at the window. He could see the first rays of sunlight peek through the horizon and knew it was time for him to leave. And so, with one last glance and kiss on the forehead on the now younger blonde woman, who had a smile on her face, Naruto left. He walked toward the sleigh, looking at the deer. Man, this night was just absolutely crazy. First I kill Santa, my bad. Then I go around delivering present to everyone in the village, entering Anko and Kurine's subconsciousness and seeing whole new sides to them, created things out of nothing, and finally dodged the Hokage. The part of still thought this all a dream, for it was too insane, but another part didn't care and just went with it. The night was done, and it was Christmas morning, and now, all he wanted was to head home and go to sleep after being up all night. He got on the sleigh and grabbed the reins. Alright guys. This Santa is done for the night, so take me back to my apartment and you guys can go wherever it is you go to. With a whip, they took off into the sky. However, as they flew, Naruto began to realize something was wrong. Why? Because they were heading away from Konoha. Hey. What's the deal, guys, take me home. He yelled, pulling at the reins. However, the deer would not listen and continued to pull the sleigh and him away from the village guy. He didn't know what was going on, but something was telling him. His job as Santa was not done. Naruto covered a yawn, keeping a grasp on the reins, as the 9 magical reindeer drove the magical sleigh of Santa Claus to Kami knows where, soaring through the dawnbreak morning sky over the land by some unknown magical force. He had just left the area of the Land of Fire around an hour ago, and had no idea where the deer were taking him, forests and land passing under him in a blur. He tried to ask the surprisingly smart non-talking animals, but like Yerks they ignored him. And so, he had no choice but to accept his kinda kidnapping after a long night of strangeness, strange even by shinobi standards, yet strangely less strange than the type of stuff Hess experienced in his genin career so far. Yeah, nothing will top being eaten by a giant snake, nothing. Of course, he could always just jump off the sleigh and escape, however, with a glance over the edge, he quickly cancelled that idea. He may have survived a somewhat 25-ish plus foot drop in the land of snow when he tried to chase after Dodo when he kidnapped Koyuki. However, even he wasn't crazy enough to try his luck with a 100+ foot drop. Don't even think about it, brat, you know as well as I do that you won't survive that, even with your dumb luck. Hearing the comment from Kyuubi, who awoke sometime earlier, commenting on how amusing his container's act of killing the Christmas figure was, Naruto grumbled. Sitting back, part of him was still reluctant to accept the earlier events that had led up to his current position. That part of Naruto still fully believed that this whole thing was nothing more than a dream. Something made from either drinking spoiled milk or bad ramen, impossible and blasphemous as such a thing is, and sooner or later, he was wake up, back in bad. After all, the whole scenario was just crazy. Him accidentally killing Santa Claus. Santa Claus, the Santa Claus. Father freaking Christmas. Startling him enough that the jolly old bearded man fell off his roof. It was too insane. Right? Santa Claus wasn't real, right? But the feeling of rushing cold wind felt real enough. And the feeling of the cushion on his behind. And? No. It can't be true, it just couldn't be. But, the reindeer and the chimney, the flying and the clothes and the… Wide-eyed, Naruto turned completely white as the slow cold truth began to wash over him, the realization of the consequences of the actions that transpired striking him like a chidori through the chest. Oh shit. Falling silent, something that rarely happens for someone as hyperactive as him. Naruto just sat there, mind reeling as the repercussions of his actions caught up to him. All awareness of the world around him faded as the sleigh flew through the sky, only a single thought went through his head. I really fucked up, Dadabeo. It was some time later, while still flying, that Naruto miraculously fell asleep, the large red coat providing warmth from the cold altitude wind. His previous excitement from flying through the night sky had quickly died out as exhaustion struck him. He had the reins tightly tied to the bar of the sleigh to keep the deer steady, however. He was quickly awoken by the feeling of sudden chilling cold, one much colder than what he felt before, with a feeling like needles stabbing into his face. Naruto jolted awake as he tightened the coat around him to keep himself warm. Aside from the Santa Claus attire, he had no warm clothing to protect him. As he reached back and pulled the hood the coat had over his head. He blinked as he looked around, only for his eyes to widen when he saw where exactly he was. No longer was he in the familiar massive forest of the Land of Fire, or any forest for that matter, nor some rocky or desert environment. Instead, he found himself in a familiar, but at the same time different snow-covered region, with the snow blowing hard. What the hell? Mentally going over the world map taught to him, read. Jammed into his head by Jiraiya, Haruka, and Sakura, both with patience and without, he would say he was either in the snowy regions of Land of Iron, in the parts of the Land of Snow the nearly activated heating system had not reached, or some other unknown snowland. The question was, why did the reindeer take him there? But before he could comment on it, he had to hold on tight as the sleigh was suddenly pulled downward. Whoa. Hey. Grabbing the reins, he tried to pull the reindeer upward to change course, but it was no use as they continued flying downward, pulling the sleigh with them as they shot straight down toward the icy ground below. Crap baskets. Luckily, what seemed like a suicide dive was soon changed as at the last minute, the reindeer pulled up slightly and leveled to the snow and icy ground, slowly lowering to the solid ice floor before sliding over the ice and snow-covered ground, eventually coming to a stop with a short slide. Sighing in relief, thanking Kami that he was still alive, Naruto glared at the deer, standing up from the sleigh. What the hell are you guys doing? Dadabayo, where did you take me? Why are we here? You're supposed to take me home. However, they didn't respond. Instead, with a shared glance, they nodded to one another before suddenly pulling the reins from Naruto's grasp, and before he knew it, each ran out into the blizzard, going their separate ways, ignoring the blonde's cries to come back. Hey, wait. I'm sorry for shouting at you, Dadabayo. Come back. However, it was no use, and before he knew it, the deer vanished into the dense blizzard around the area, waterfall tears going down his cheeks at his predicament. Naruto moaned, they left me to die. Why do animals hate me? First Kyuubi hates me, then Orochimaru's giant-ass snake tried to eat me, and now reindeer. Says a lot about how pathetic you are, doesn't it, brat? Kyuubi snickered. Shut it, fox. Naruto mentally shouted, before dropping down on the seat with a sigh of defeat. I hate my life sometimes, he muttered as he pulled on the coat tighter to protect him from the cold, shivering as he was left all alone to suffer the abysmal hellish frosty storm. This it, I'm gonna die here, aren't I? Just my Kamadam luck, Dadabayo. Ear twitching, Naruto raised his head, blinking in confusion as he could have sworn he heard giggling. Looking around, he tried to see where it could have come from, though it was kinda difficult with the hard blizzard. Maybe it's someone who can help me get back to the Land of Fire. With hope rising in his heart, he stood up in the sleigh, calling out, hello, is anyone there? Haha. Looking at where he thought the giggle came from, he squinted as he could swear he saw a figure in the storm. Hello, was there? Whoever it was seemed to be approaching his way. Soon, it was visible enough that, squinting a bit, he could make out their appearance even if just barely, making him blink. The figure was a young girl, looking about his age, from what little he could see, which is a shinobi. His eyesight was a lot sharper compared to civilians, but largely inferior to those with Dojutsu like the Byakugan or Sharingan, so as such he was able to see detail. Even with the blizzard she had long light blue, almost icy blue. Seemingly glittering even in the harsh blizzard with two bangs on either side of her head being braided. She wore an open light blue coat with white fur rims, with the front collar held together with a blue ribbon, with the coat being big enough to go down to her knees, which were covered in white stockings. Her hands were covered with long white gloves, while her feet were covered with simple ankle-high boots. Yet, even with the blowing blizzard around her, she didn't seem bothered by the cold at all, standing in the snow, with nay a shiver or an arm rub, just a calm smile on her face. As Naruto stared at her, the girl's soft light blue eyes looked straight at him, smiling at him with a beautiful smile that made him blush a bit. And it was not from the cold, he could honestly say. He had never seen such a cute girl before. Kurenai, Anko, and Tsunade don't count as they were women, though maybe Hinata, admittedly Ino, and maybe Tenten could be candidates for his generation. The harsh wind blowing her hair only seemed to enhance her beauty, as in contrast to the harsh winds, it seemed to almost wave smoothly with the wind. Naruto tried to say, but couldn't form the words. His dazed state made the girl giggle, making his blush grow, before she knelt down to the ground and seemed to press something out of his view. Suddenly, the ground around the sleigh began to shake, making him yelp as he grabbed onto the sleigh's bar in order to keep his balance. Before he knew it, the ground around him began to crack, making him yelp in shock and fear, only instead of the ground under him just breaking open, it began to lower slowly in a calm and smooth motion, making him cry out in surprise, "Hey!" He tried to jump out of the possible trap, only to find himself suddenly being forcefully pulled down on the sleigh's seat and unable to move. What the hell? He tried to break free from whatever was holding him to the seat, but it was no use. He looked at the girl still standing in the snow. "What is this? Who are you?" But the girl just smiled at him, even waving at him. Before he could say anything, the hole above him closed as a layer of ice immediately creeped over it, putting the area back to normal, showing absolutely no sign of disturbance. All the while, the blue-haired girl continued to smile at the spot the sleigh was formerly at, before turning around and leaving, a skip in her step. Naruto was ready for anything as the slight, and therefore him, were lowered down the secret pathway under the ice, greatly cautious and fearful of whatever awaits him at the end of this death ride. The group of enemy shinobi ready to surround and capture him. The barrage of kunai launched at him, triggered by a trap. Even the Akatsuki, aiming to tear Kyuubi from his seal and leave him for dead. However, what he was not expecting, though, was what looked like a domed city under the ice. Seriously, it was huge. It looked to be the size of the whole of Konoha, maybe even larger. There were houses and buildings all around, blanketed in pure white snow. The ceiling was colored not just blue, but many moving colors, too many to recognize them all. It was so lifelike, he almost forgot it wasn't really the sky, and in the distance, he spotted what looked like mountains, covered in snow and glittering under the aurora ceiling, and wondered if the whole place really were even real, or some kind of genjutsu. After all, there was no way there could be an entire land underground, right? As the sleigh was nearing the ground, lowered at a slow pace by some unknown force, Naruto spotted one last thing, and probably what he should have noticed first, with it being so eye-catching. It was a large building, about the same size as the Hokage Tower, maybe larger. It was painted red, with white for the roof. Also, while he couldn't be sure, Naruto thinks he could see something that looked like a stable for horses in the distance. Wait a minute, Naruto thought, blinking. Snow region, sleigh, reindeer, Santa Claus. He paled, realizing where he was. He would have preferred an enemy village to where he currently was. He debated attempting to leap off and make a run for it, but unfortunately for him, before he could, the sleigh touched down on the ground, making him curse. Looking around at where he was, he saw that he had descended into an open roof building. It was large on the inside, had a lot of space, and was filled with people. Well, people might not be the right word. There were large, hairy beasts standing or walking around the large area, along with what appeared to be young children, some looking to be his age, some appearing to be the same age as the Konohamaru squad, and some looked to be even younger, running around the place with happy smiles. Meanwhile, the beasts would walk around, grunting as they moved, passing him idle glances before going through doors leading to somewhere. As for the children, they all stopped moving, their eyes on him. Some muttered amongst themselves, yet all smiled at him, smiling joyfully. And through all that, Naruto could only say, "Wah? Clap. Clap. Okay everyone. Pay attention. Big man has arrived. Well, maybe not big, but still. Stop what you're doing and gather around for introductions." Hearing the sound of clapping and talking, Naruto turned his head and saw a young girl heading his way. She had light brown hair and light green eyes, and like the silver-haired girl, wore a Santa-like outfit, only hers were a bit more hem-revealing. The skirt stopped above her knees, with the legs having black stockings, with some of her skin still being revealed in the spacing. The front of her coat was opened, revealing a black lace bra, as well as the cleavage of her bountiful C-cup breasts. Her arms had red, fur-edge arm warmers, and red gloves. Clipped on her Santa hat was a mistletoe with a small bell. One thing that stood out was her long pointed-end ears. He couldn't help but stare at them a bit longer than he should, before pushing his focus back on her face. And just like the blue-haired girl from above ground, Naruto had to admit that this one was really cute. Seeing her approach the sleigh, Naruto quickly lost his stunness and began to panic, thinking she was expecting to see Santa, and tried to hide. Thankfully, he seemed to once more be able to move. However, before he could perform a substitution, the girl was beside the sleigh, looking at him, with a few beasts and the gathering children surrounding it on all sides. Frozen, Naruto stared at the girl, who stared back in silence. Naruto really wasn't sure what to say, and could only stand there, frozen as the girl's green eyes paralyzed him on the spot. The brunette looked at Naruto, blinking, before a smirk crossed her face as she placed her hands on her hips. "Well, are you just going to stand there like an idiot forever, or are you going to get out of the sleigh and introduce yourself?" Blinking, Naruto glanced at the large creatures staring at him in silence, some grunting to themselves while the children giggled softly. Patching up to what he was thinking, the girl waved him off. Don't worry about them, they won't hurt you. Now, care to step out of the sleigh like a big boy, or do I need to help you? She asked, smirking. The remark snapped him out of his stupor, as glaring at her, Naruto did as told and stepped out of the carriage, nodding. The girl continued, now, introduce yourself please. Nervousness once more rising, Naruto gulped, okay, taking a calming breath, as well as preparing himself to make a quick escape if needed. Naruto spoke up, the name's Naruto Uzumaki, proud shinobi of Konohagakure, and there he stopped, not quite sure what he could say, or even if he should he really announce that he. The new Santa Claus, the girl finished for him. Naruto nodded, before his eyes widened, his head snapping towards her. What? The girl nodded, yup. I mean, you did kill Santa. Naruto flinched nervously, accidentally of course, and you put on the suit, didn't you read the card? Card? The card you found in the coat, you still have it, right? She asked, too dazed to say anything. Naruto acted unconsciously, reaching into the coat pocket, took out the said card, handing it to the girl. Thank you, snapping her fingers, one of the hairy creatures approached her, carrying a large magnifying glass, and he was talking large, it looked like something Kyuubi could use as a monocle. Thanking the hairy creature while it held it, she positioned the card behind the glass for Naruto to see. Flipping the card over, she showed the back, zooming into what Naruto thought to be a decorative frame, only to see that it was actually just small text. As you can see, it says so right here, clear as magnified day. Then putting on this suit and entering the sleigh, the wearer waives any and all rights to any previous identity, real or implied, and fully accepts the duties and responsibilities of Santa Claus in perpetuity until such a time that the wearer becomes unable to do so by either accident or design. Naruto looked at the very well-hidden statement he first thought to be a line frame around the title address with a lost look. All the while, the girl had an amused grin on her face. Nani? Basically, you killed Santa, and by putting on his clothes and riding his sleigh, became the new Santa Claus. She declared with a cheerful tone and a large smile. Naruto looked at her blankly, blinking once. Twice. Thrice. Nani? Hello Santa Claus. All the children greeted in unison, nearly deafening the poor, stunned Genin as he looked around with wide eyes. Nani? So this is the main manufactory line, it stretches out around the factory. Hey wait a minute. Now, there are more sections to see, such as the reindeer kennels, not to mention the built-in spa workers use for relaxation. Hey. Oh. And we also have a cafeteria stocked 24/7 with snacks, sweets, and hot chocolate dispensers. They are quite delicious, if you like to get some. Okay. Stop, Dadabeo. Using chakra to stick to the ground, stopping the girl who has been dragging him around the factory, he snatched his hand from her grasp. Just what is going on around here? What do you mean Santa? Where am I? And who are you? Looking at the hysterical, glaring blonde, the girl nodded in understanding. You're confused, I understand, sorry about that, I'll explain everything. Clearing her throat, she pointed at herself. My name is Nicola, I'm Santa's personal assistant and head elf in charge of managing the worker elves and ensure that all progress is smooth. I worked closely with the previous Santa. And now I'll assist you with anything that you need. We're in what was once known as the North Pole, now known as the Land of Frost as your people call it, considering the massive land shift throughout the centuries. Now, what I meant by you being the new Santa Claus is just as I said, because your actions caused the untimely demise of Santa, followed by you putting on his coat. Sat in his sleigh and finished delivering the remaining presents. Thank you for that. By the way, as stated within the certified Santa Claus, you are therefore the new Santa Claus. Naruto stared at her, wide-eyed and slack-jawed. But, I can't be Santa. I have a duty as a shinobi of Konoha. I can't be delivering presents all over the world. Nicola looked at him with a begging look. You have to. She said, clapping her hands in a prayer motion, getting into his personal space, taking him by surprise. You're the only one we have. We can't do it, we're just elves, and the Yetis are just builders, they can't deliver the toys. Besides, the code and title have already chosen you, and won't allow a refusal. Eyes widening, Naruto tried to take off the coat, only to find that her words rang through as he was unable to take it off. Oh oi. Come off damn it. Nicola shook her head, it's no use, that coat is made sentient with magic, think of it as a fraction of Santa's essence, it knows you are trying to refuse to be Santa, and it's not letting you. Naruto gritted his teeth as he continued to try and get the coat off to no use, not even the hat will come off. I can't do this. He continued to struggle with the articles as Nicola watched with concealed amusement, gritting his teeth as he pulled as hard as he could. The coat slipped out of his grasp, causing him to fall backward. Nicola covered a giggle as Naruto grumbled about annoying living clothing. I'm sorry, Naruto, but the clothes are magic and sense you trying to get out of the deal, not that you could. Getting up, Naruto shook his head, but I just can't be Santa. I don't even know how. Besides, I have a duty to Konoha as a shinobi. He honestly didn't expect this night to happen as it did. Well, sure, he was glad to deliver presents, recalling the joy Mogi had in her eyes when she saw him. The last thing he expected was to be Santa. How does such a thing even happen? By killing the old Santa, the killer is given such a role. Talk about messed up. Nicola frowned, nodding. I know, I've read your record, but being a shinobi is dangerous. Nicola exclaimed, a worried look in her eyes. You were close to death so many times. Kringle, you nearly died twice. You may have gotten lucky so far, but one day your luck is going to run out, and we need a Santa. The world needs Santa. He raised a brow at her. How did you know about that? Santa keeps track of every person on the planet to know wo's nice and wo's naughty, Nicola stated proudly. She then lost her smile, frowning as she glanced to the side. At least, he was supposed to. Naruto blinked at her, raising a brow. What was that? Nicola shook her head, waving her hand with a smile. Nothing, nothing at all. But listen. Narrowing her eyes, Nicola gained a serious expression. I know it's all sudden and unexpected, but you are really the only option there is. It's a huge miracle that Christmas has even managed to survive and be known in this new world. If you reject being Santa, there will be no more Santa. And without Santa, there'll be no more Christmas. Naruto looked at her like she was crazy. Isn't it a little overreacting? Just find someone else to be Santa. Besides, it's not like people and kids get presents just from Santa. He exclaimed, knowing that even without a Santa, children would most likely get presents from their parents or loved one. To say that Santa was the only reason was just talking crazy. However, Nicola shook her head. No, that's not it. It's not just the presents. Christmas is celebrated because of Santa. His presence and existence brings cheer and joy to the world. When people think of Santa, they are filled with happiness and anticipation. When they hear the sound of bells, their sorrow, sadness, any negativity they have is washed away and replaced with happy and loving memories. Christmas is because of Santa, and Santa is because of the love and joy the world has for this special time of year. If that is removed, shaking her head, Nicola dreaded to imagine. Naruto frowned, looking away. What could he say after all that? Still, me be Santa. Me it's crazy. Become Hokage is one thing but Santa Claus. Seeing the hesitation on Naruto's face, Nicola looked sadly at him, sighing, I know it's a lot to ask but please, at least think it over. Christmas has ended, and we have a whole year till next Christmas night. That should give you enough time to come to a decision, even with your shinobi duties. Silent for a moment, Naruto thought. To be the new Santa. Part of him, the part that stubbornly rejected any and all obstacle in the way of his dream of becoming Konoha's future Hokage, wanted to outright shout and deny the offer. Being Hokage has been his dream since forever. He couldn't accept being Santa Claus if there was the slightest of chance of it getting in the way of his dream. However, the flashes of Anko, Kurenai, Tsunade and Mogi popped into his head, the smiles they had when he gave them their gifts and made their Christmas better, the proud, happy and warm feeling he got when he saw those smiles. The old Santa was gone. Because of him, if he hadn't startled the man, he wouldn't have fallen off his roof. But how was I supposed to know Santa Claus was real? I stopped believing in him a long time ago. It was one thing to believe in demons and Biju and ghosts, but Santa Claus. For all I knew, it could have been a drunk villager trying to break into my apartment again. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Looking up from his downward gaze, he saw Nicola smiling comfortably at him. Like I said, you have a year to think about it, she said, to which after a moment, Naruto nodded. A year sounded like enough time. Now, you must be tired after the night you had. I'll have a room prepared for you, along with some light snacks. You can rest the night here. And before you know it, you'll be back in your village when you wake up. In the meantime, you're free to explore the toy factory, she said, gesturing around the area. Glancing around, Naruto nodded slowly. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't curious about the place. After all, this was Santa's workshop. Any kid worth their imagination dreamed of visiting this place. The little, lonely kid in his heart was in immense awe at the place, begging his body to explore every inch of the place. He was knocked out of his thoughts as Nicola spoke. I'll have someone accompany you to show you to your room when ready. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask them. The whisked blonde nodded. All right, he said, covering a yawn that tried to escape his mouth. He was surprised at how tired he was. That rarely happens. With how much energy he usually had, who knew discovering Santa Claus, panicking over accidentally killing him, finding Santa's reindeer and sleigh, before delivering presents throughout Konoha. Then flying to some snow-covered land could be so exhausting. Nodding back with a smile, Nicola turned to head to wherever else she was needed. However, just as she took a step, she paused in place. Tilting his head in confusion, Naruto watched as the head elf turned her head back towards him with a questionable expression. He was about to ask her what was wrong, only to freeze, his eyes widening. He stood there, not moving, his mind glitching with questions upon questions. The reason? It would be because Nicola, a girl he just met not even half an hour ago, was embracing him, her arms wrapped around him in a hold, not too tightly, but enough that he could still feel the pressure of the gentle, almost comforting hug. Confused eyes blinked, rolling to gaze at the young woman who currently had her head beside his own, her chin resting at the crook of his neck and shoulder. Raising a brow, he was about to ask her why was hugging him, only to be cut off as Nicola spoke. "It was an accident," she muttered, her voice soft as she spoke gently into his ear. "Trust me when I say that no one here blames you. We all knew one day Santa was going to get caught sooner or later, and as sad as it is to say, this isn't the first time this has happened. It was always a matter of when, not how or why, in a world of shinobi. The chances of Santa being able to move around undetected has gotten much harder than before. We expected this, sure, we'll all miss Santa, but we can't cry and mourn, we need to think about the children and families of the world." Naruto was quiet, feeling a sort of weight pressing down on his shoulders, not for the fact that Santa was dead because of him, but more that they want him to replace Santa. The decision we just could make at that moment, would that make him a bad person? To not want to be Santa? It would disappoint a lot of people should Christmas come to an end and it would be all his fault. To be Hokage, it means to see the whole village as your family. To be Hokage, it means to care for the well-being and happiness of every man, woman and child. In a way, being Santa is like being Hokage for the whole world. Being Santa means to care for the happiness of everyone. It sounds like a tough job, but if I want to become Hokage, I need to at least get some experience for it. Adebayo. If I can keep the whole world happy as Santa Claus, I can my village happy as Hokage. Naruto thought, a fire in his eyes as he made his decision. It was because of him that Santa fall off his roof. It was his fault and it was time he took responsibility. He will be the new Santa and will be the best there ever was. It was a promise of a lifetime. He'll do it. Blinking, Nicole leaned back and out of the embrace, looking at Naruto in confusion. What? He'll do it, he'll be Santa, he stated, looking completely serious. Nicola blinked once. Nicola blinked twice. Nicola blinked thrice. Really? Naruto nodded. Really? Nod. Really? Starting to get annoyed, Naruto sighed. Yes, alright, it's my fault anyway, so I need to fix it, Dadabayo, so it'll be your Santa. I. Flinching from the loud shriek of happiness, Naruto yelped as the light brunette practically leaped at him, nearly knocking him down as she pulled him into another, tighter embrace. His cheeks began to burn as he looked around in embarrassment at the contact. His embarrassment only grew when he saw the children elves and Yetis around look their way. The younger-looking kids looking at them in confusion and curiosity, while the older ones looked at them in amusement, some chuckling. With a reddening face, Naruto would only awkwardly pant Nicholas back as she continued to hug him tightly. Thankfully, after a minute, the head elf released him, stepping back as she gave the genin a wide smile, making him clear his throat as he looked away from the admittedly cute smile. "Thank you so much, Naruto-kun. I promise y'all have a great time being Santa. I need to go get things for your Santa learning ready. Campanella will be here soon to show you around and take you to your room to rest, which I also need to get ready. He'll see you again soon. Bye." But that rushed statement, Nicola spun around and quickly walked off at a fast pace, a large smile on her face, leaving the genin alone, who wondered if he was making the right choice in accepting the Santa role. With a heavy sigh, Naruto shook his head, no backing out now. Turning around, Naruto leaned against a railing he stood in front of, taking a look around. He was in Santa's workshop, something not every genin could say. Might as well take the opportunity to take in the sights. To his awe, now that he observed the location he was dragged to, he saw he was in some kind of assembling room at a lower level. In the center of the room was a long conveyor belt that stretched and curved all around the floor, with Yetis standing at various spots around it. As the belt rolled, logs would appear from an entry. The Yeti would grab a log as they moved in front of them, and to Naruto's surprise, would gracefully start cutting, hacking, and shaving the wood with tools. In a show of incredible skill and talent, Naruto has never seen anyone pull before, not even Shinobi. The large hairy beasts would shave and cut and carve the pieces of wood into wooden toys, all in a minute or less. He recognized some of the toys being made, from simple toys like take-tombos, bamboo copter, to bigoma, Japanese spinning tops, hanitsuki, Japanese badminton, daruma atashi, and kendama amongst other types. His eyes watched as the Yeti, once finished sculpting the toys, placed them back on the belt. He followed the wooden toys down the belt, where they reached a separate group of Yeti with cans of paint set near them. As the wooden toys reached them, the Yetis would carefully pick them up individually and start painting them, careful not to mess up. As he watched the Yeti work, he glanced at where elves played with finished toys, giggling and laughing with such joy that it made him smile. He leaned against the railing behind him, content with watching the elves play with the toys and having fun. "Santa?" Well, he was more or less coming and accepting his newfound title at least until he had gotten enough rest, and the full panic came in. Naruto couldn't help but flinch at the voice, no doubt calling him. Turning his head, he spotted a female elf at his side, like Nicola. This one looked around his age, unlike the children-like elves that resembled 6 to 12-year-olds. Along with the occasional toddler he spotted by chance. She had long pale blonde hair reaching her lower back, along with 2 braids going down the sides of her face to rest on her upper chest, which, to his embarrassment, was quite large for her age. She could almost put Anko-chan to shame, he thought, trying not to stare at her low to mid-D cup breasts, a generous amount of cleavage in plain view from her low-hanging warm fur coat. A neatly tied bow holding the front close, holding her breasts back. She also had bows on the sides of her head in her hair, and what looked like a mistletoe around her neck and a collar. Why? Naruto hadn't had the faintest of ideas and had rather not think about the implications of it being placed directly above her cleavage. Ahem. Moving on with the description, he could see her long ears peeking out from her curtain of hair, twitching slightly, almost happily, looking at her face. He saw her smiling widely at him, her honey brown eyes staring at him with a variety of positive emotions, the biggest being awe, happiness, and gratitude. He only needed a second to guess her identity. Let me guess, Campanella. Her smile somehow grew wider, and the girl nodded. Yup. That's me. It's so great to meet you, new Santa. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Just call me Naruto, okay? He'd prefer to be called by his name instead of his new title. Campanella nodded, the smile still on her face. Of course, sir. Would you like me to finish your tour? Or would you like me to take you to your room? It should be ready by now. He rubbed the back of his head, feeling kinda embarrassed about being offered to be escorted to a granted bedroom, not used to getting such treatment. Yeah, I think I just want to sleep and put this night behind me, Dadabeo. Giggling, Campanella nodded in understanding, bowing gently, of course, sir. If you are feeling hungry, I can call for a plate of cookies and warm milk to be delivered to you. He grimaced. He had eaten enough cookies and drank enough milk while delivering the last presents in Konoha to last him a good while. No thanks, I'm good. Very well, please follow me. Doing as told, Naruto followed the female blonde as they walked out of the workroom, moving through the many running and laughing child elves and passing working yeti. Naruto idly wondered why the creatures were crafting toys when Christmas night was over, but in the end, he was too tired to think too much about it. He followed the teen-like elf down a hall. Passing a door with a signed ballroom above it, the shadows of various balls bouncing all around inside, they walked in silence for a few minutes, Naruto at times glancing around, observing the place and various doors, as he followed behind the still smiling Campanella. They soon approached a large double-set door, the letters South Carolina and stylized design on the red glass. Opening the door, Campanella stepped to the side, gesturing to Naruto inside. Hesitating for a second, Naruto entered the room, the blonde following behind, before she walked to a part of the room, leaving Naruto to look around. The room was quite large, easily double the size of his whole apartment. The walls were colored a gentle crimson red, with long golden designs placed along the top and bottom edges all around the room. The room has a balcony to the side with the doors open, showing a majestic view of the city and the fake sky outside. There was a large bed against the wall, large enough to hold 2. Maybe 3 people with some room left over, red sheets and covers. Finally, there were various toys of different sizes and types scattered around the room, from bouncy balls to stuffed animals small and big and even adult size or larger, as he looked at the actual bear-sized teddy bear in the corner. The what looked like a medium-sized puppet theater placed against the wall in front of the bed, with 2 puppets conversing with one another and occasionally bumping the other with their foam clubs. He looked at the puppets weirdly, raising a brow at them. Said puppet soon took notice of him and greeted him with waves and hellos. Dumbfounded, Naruto could only give them a small wave. Yeah, he was ready to sleep and forget this whole night. Luckily, Campanella soon returned, holding a set of what looked like red silk woven pajamas. Here you go, she said, passing him the clothing. I tried to find a set in your size. I hope these will do. Thanks, Naruto muttered as he held the pajamas. Smiling at him, she gestured to a thick rope tied to a bell placed against the wall beside the bed. If you require anything, just ring the bell, and someone will quickly come to assist you. Do not hesitate as we will all gladly aid you in whatever you need, she said, getting a nod. Thanks, I think I'm good, Dadabeo. Nodding, Campanella smiled at the whiskered blonde. Again, on behalf of everyone here in Santa's workshop, thank you for agreeing to take Santa's place, Naruto-kun. I hope you have a pleasant night. And please, don't be afraid to come visit again. Have a pleasant Christmas and enjoy your year. Naruto nodded mutely, watching as Campanella exited the room, closing the door behind her. Left alone in Santa's old room, Naruto let out a heavy sigh. Part of me hopes this has all been one big dream, he muttered as he took off Santa's coat, tossing it onto a nearby fancy-looking chair. Taking off the straps of the overalls, Naruto let it fall, revealing his boxers. Ah yeah. The puppet screamed in surprise and embarrassment, scaring Naruto. Spinning around to face them, he saw the puppets turn away from him, covering their eyes, cheeks burning red in embarrassment. Naruto quickly pulled the pants back up. "Oh come on, Dadabeo." This place was weird. Christmas morning, Naruto's apartment. The light of the morning sun passed harmlessly through the faint curtains of the room, rays beaming through the stitched fabric, illuminating the small bedroom. As the rays struck a thick lump on the bed, with silent intent, the rays tried to pierce through the sheet protecting the individual under it. Such was their purpose, to abruptly awaken all individuals the sun shines down on, demanding they prepare their days full of activity and not laze about for hours on end. Yes, such was the sun's purpose. Unfortunately for the sun and its rays, the beam was unable to properly penetrate through the sheet and therefore unable to awaken the slumbering form of one Uzumaki Naruto. After all, why would Naruto wake up so early in the morning? When the sun was just rising. Especially on a Christmas day. He had no missions today, as Tsuneda's given Genin teams, Chunin, and Jonin senseis the day off to enjoy themselves. He had also trained himself to the point of complete exhaustion the day before, and at Shizun's command, he was to take a break from training to rest his body. So, with his day free, he was allowed to take a page from Shika's book and sleep in all morning. So there he was, curled up nice and comfy under the warmness of his bedsheet to ward off the winter cold, nearly suffocating himself as he pressed his face deep into his pillow, mumbling under his breath about crazy dreams of reindeer, children like elves, and him being Santa Claus. Yup, Naruto was content with just staying home all day, ignoring all strange dreams, as well as thoughts of training and missions, just him, his bed, and his warm protective sheet. At least, that was his intent. Unfortunately. Bang. 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 Naruto groaned in his sleep as the sound of something or someone striking against his door echoed throughout his apartment. He tried to block it out, not wanting to leave the land of dreams, however, the pounding continued. Boy. Naruto. Wake up, dude. Kiba. What did dog breath want? It was too early for his crap. Come on, dope. Get your ass up. We're supposed to all get together, remember? Oh yeah, he was supposed to meet up with his friends to exchange presents, wasn't he? Kiba, stop being so loud. Munch maybe he stayed up training. Scoffwolden doubted. Shikamaru and Choji too. Damn, now he really had to get up. Troublesome, Dadabeo. With a heavy sigh, Naruto sat up, the sheet draped over his body before he pulled it off, eyes still closed, he stretched his mouth wide open in a yawn, smacking his lips, he rubbed the muck from his eyes as he stood up from his bed, with his eyes still closed, he slowly made his way out of his room into his small living room. He passed by empty cups of ramen, and a few kunai and shuriken littered on his floor as he moved towards the door, where he could still hear pounding. Damn it, Kiba, knock it off already. Dope. Open the freaking door before I tear it too. Grabbing the handle, Naruto yanked it open, his eyes opened halfway to glare at the stupefied Inuzuka. Kiba, shut the hell up already, Dadabeo. You're lucky I don't have neighbors. Kiba was silent, staring wide-eyed at the blonde. Off to the side, Shikamaru and Choji looked on silently, the Akamichi pausing in his eating holding a submarine sandwich, as long as his arm with a wide variety of meat. Shikamaru blinked before sighing, rubbing the back of his head. What a drag, he moaned. Blinking, Kiba began to laugh loudly, pointing a finger at Naruto, much to his annoyance. Haha. Dude, what the hell are you wearing? Naruto's eye twitched at Kiba, no doubt making fun of his nightcap, the bastard. It was a birthday gift from the old man. Shut the hell up, Kiba. This was a gift. Kiba snorted. That's quite the gift, does it come with a dress? He asked, laughing as Naruto growled. Knock it off, Kiba, the Chunin of the group ordered, looking on with a bored expression as usual. As Kiba crossed his arms with a huff, Shikamaru turned to Naruto. Did you forget we are supposed to meet up with the others at Ichiraku? This was your idea. Naruto let out an annoyed huff, crossing his arms. No, I didn't forget. I just had a busy night, as all. Kiba scoffed. Busy, right, probably eating ramen as usual. Don't you diss the food of the gods, Dadabeo. Groaning, Shikamaru rubbed his forehead in annoyance. Enough. Naruto, get dressed and meet us at Ichiraku, alright. Naruto waved him off. Yeah. I know, just give me a few minutes to get ready, I'll meet you there. Nodding, Shikamaru turned and walked to leave the building with Choji and a chuckling Kiba behind him. Turning, Naruto walked back into his apartment, closing the door behind him. He huffed, muttering swears about Kiba for making fun of his sleeping clothes. So what if he wore a cartoonish cap to sleep? It was only one of the first gifts he ever got, so that made it one of the most awesome things ever. Shaking his head, he pushed it out of his head and focused on getting ready to head out, making sure to remember to take the presents he got his friends with him. He headed to his bathroom to brush his teeth, turning the light on. He turned the water on as he grabbed his toothbrush and toothpaste. Applying the paste, he stuck the brush into his mouth. As he brushed his teeth, he raised his gaze to the mirror. He immediately froze, staring wide-eyed at his reflection. Everything looked the same in terms of his appearance. His hair was still golden and spiky, his eyes were still blue, his whisker marks were still whiskers. Yeah, everything looked alright. Except for one little fact. His breath got caught in his throat, toothbrush hanging in his mouth, as he stared at the deep red silk-woven pajama shirt and pants, a pocket stitched over his left breast, with a stylish South Carolina on it. His mind flashed back to his dream and its sequence of events. Santa Claus. Santa falling over the edge of his roof. 9 reindeer and a sleigh. Mogi and presents. A snowy region. Younger children and big hairy beasts. The long-eared brunette. The long-eared blonde. His agreement to be Santa Claus. Outside the apartment building, the awakening civilians and patrolling shinobi all jumped as a loud scream echoed through the air. Thanks for watching.